how to communicate in a beyond busy world, cutting through the commotion for purpose, clarity, connection, and results. And I got the inspiration to do this at least a year ago, it might have been 2, when I was listening to Jill Conrad talk about selling in a beyond busy world. We chatted about it later, and she thought I was laughing at her just because I was smiling so big during her entire presentation. And I was smiling big because she was putting some light bulbs on. She does a great presentation, and if you're in sales, I absolutely recommend her work, also if you sell to big corporations. But I took her work in terms of power phrases, in terms of what I talk about and general communication and outside of the sales world. How have things changed? And that was the real light bulb that she opened up for me. How have things changed since we all got so busy? So in this webinar, you're going to learn what's going on, how busyness has changed the way that people communicate, what 6 assumptions you can no longer make in a beyond busy world. I'm going to give you one very counterintuitive tip, and it's a very simple one, but it's very powerful. It's counterintuitive, and it will increase the effectiveness of your communication. I'm going to tell you what you can do up front to minimize the fallout from gotta-go communication. You know what I'm talking about. It's like when it's kind of almost drive-by communication where someone just lays something on you and they don't even get in the door and they're out the door as they're finishing their last sentence. We're going to talk about when you need to be assertive and when you need to cut people some slack in this busy new world. And I'm going to give you top 10 power phrases that you can use to cut through the noise of your busyness world. So about a month ago, I visited Menlo Software. It's a software company in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I was taking a lean office class. And a couple of us went to their Menlo Software tour. I had never heard of them, but I figured, hey, why not? Well, it answered a question, or what it did was present an alternative to how we can operate. Here's what Menlo Software does. They actually plan for a 40-hour week for all of their software developers. And here's how they do it. They have their developers estimate the size of a job, how long they expect it will take. So all of their projects are broken into smaller pieces, and they estimate what's involved, and they put them on a card. Now, they do it in 2-hour, 4-hour, 8-hour, and 16-hour, and 32-hour increments. The lady told me that they also have 64, but that basically says it's too big to schedule without breaking it up. So what they do is they have these blue sheets that you see, and you take your card. Each week they meet with their clients, and their clients decide what they want the developers to work on in the week to come. And so they take the cards and they put them on the blue sheet that you see there, and there's a white one. They call it the scheduling game board. But here's the thing. Let's say that you have picked 36 hours worth of development, and then you see something else that is estimated at 8 hours. You can't put it in there, and it won't fit. And what I love about this method is that it makes it really clear just how much you can squeeze into a very fixed time period. I mean, it really does make it tangible. Well, what's going on here, what's happening for us is that most of companies don't plan this way. Most of us are a bit more like Steve Jobs, who had his reality distortion field, which sometimes got results, but always at a price. And sometimes it just didn't work that way. And we think that, okay, we can just stack things on and and get it done just because we decided that we were going to do it. So this comes at a cost. This kind of busyness, the sense that you have too much to do, comes at a really high cost. The first cost, or what I say, the first casualty of busyness. Well, what is it? I'd like you actually to to send me a message. What do you think? What is the first casualty of busyness? What do you say is the cost of having too much to do or being too busy? What do you see? So if you can send me a message, I'd love to see that. missing something important, making assumptions. You ever find that people make mistakes because they try to hurry? Yeah, clarity. Yeah. So I want to say that of all of these, the one that I think is most important, the one that that really gets me the most, is the sense of grace. And by grace, I do mean us being kind to each other, us treating each other like people instead of things. But I also mean to having a sense of being connected to the whole, being aligned with purpose, being tuned in with our higher self. God's grace is another way of looking at it, that by pushing, we fall from grace. We fall into a sense of rush that's a whole different style of operating. And then the effects of that is we lose clarity, we lose connection with people, and interestingly, it becomes less efficient. Brandy says, multitasking, which can take much longer, poor quality. Those are some of the costs of us being in a beyond busy world. And I am an example of this because in preparing for this, I was trying out all different kinds of presentation formats, and it took a lot longer than I thought it would. So when I was sending out the announcement, I rushed, and in that rush, first of all, I sent out a bad link, and that is costing some of you confusion. And then I sent out a corrected one after that. That was more work for me. And then the links in my newsletter, they were right to read them, but they didn't click. So that's the cost of efficiency that came from being too busy to do it right the first time. Now, I mentioned that I heard about Menlo Software because, Cheryl, I love your comment. It's also just much less enjoyable. I love my work. I really love my work. And when I am pressured, I don't love my work. And I have fun. But when I'm pressured, it's not fun. I can get an awful lot done. And yet I don't like having too much to do. So taking a look at the casualty of busyness, one of the things that really drove home when I did my Lean Office certification was really the high cost of doing things over. You might think, okay, if you have to do something a second time, it takes twice as long. That's actually not true. It's exponential. So I say that the grace and the joy and the pleasure and all of that is one of the biggest losses, and also it's extremely inefficient. So that's the business case. So how do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? Some of the stories that I've had, people who are generally competent, they forget things you told them a moment ago. It's like people don't have a focus. It seems like people have lost simple courtesy. Things like saying thank you for doing favors. You go out of your way to do something for them, and they don't even acknowledge it. Next time you hear from them is when they need something else. Their attention span seems short. People can say they're interested and excited and enthusiastic about something, and then they don't get back to you. You can ask 3 questions in an email, and you're lucky if they answer 2. You find that people don't listen. It's just not the same world as it was several years, even 10 years ago. Things have changed. So what do you do? Well, beyond busy people can seem rude. They can seem dismissive. They can seem forgetful. They can seem flaky. They can seem not so bright. They can seem unreliable. But let's take a step back now that we've had a look, because what's really going on is a lot of times being too busy and having too much to do results in giving something less attention than it deserves. I was working with a project with a woman in a very high position in her organization, obviously an intelligent person. She wouldn't be there if she was. But I'd read her responses to some of the things I sent her, and it was like, wow, this is pretty simple. How could you get this wrong? Well, she described to me what it was like in her world, and I'm going to tell you about that a little bit later. That suddenly made it clear. So here are our countermeasures or our remedies. There's 10 things we can do to communicate more effectively with people in a beyond busy world. Drop the judgments and assumptions. Make communication agreements up front. Make every interaction count. Go and see, walk in their shoes. And this can be literal or it can be figurative. Visual controls and mistake proofing, that's a lean principle. Address the specific busyness challenges. Be willing to squeak. Use power phrases. Overcome your own beyond busy habits and get it right and complete the first time to the very best of your ability. And then number 10 is to recalibrate relationships. So I'm going to take a look at the questions that I have right now. Too many mistakes, these are comments, too many mistakes absolutely is one of the costs that happens. And grace, Diane, I'm so with you there. Grace is the biggest loss. Something that could be fun and flowing becomes drudgery. And that's the hugest loss. So countermeasures, here's some countermeasures. Here's some things we can do. Dropping judgments and assumptions like people are being rude. You know, it really may be. I have experienced a lot more rude behavior in my life than I have actually met rude people. You know, we don't always experience the best of people. We might be seeing them at a downtime, but it also could just be the result of needing to take care of things. You know, as some of you know, recently my husband and I were evacuated for the Waldo Canyon fire. Our phones were ringing off the hooks, and we had to be short with people. You know, I got to pack stuff up. You know, this is we're okay. We're getting out of here. It was kind of amazing how some people wanted to keep us on the line. We weren't being rude. We were doing what really had to happen. It's easy to assume that if someone doesn't get back to you, they're not interested and they're blowing you off. I recently had someone tell me that he read my Speak Strong book, and he applied that by following up with some people he had asked favors from. And they were actually very happy to give him the favor. He had assumed they weren't interested. They were blowing him off. That wasn't true at all. Another assumption, when you finally get a window of time, jump through it with everything you've got. You know, sometimes you have to do that. But don't do that as an impulse, because what that can do is create such a sense of overload that it actually creates more inefficiency. I always recommend carrying something, some way. Here's my favorite tool. It's my little mini recorder that I record open loops for, and then I put them in my organizational system later so that things don't get lost when you can't handle everything in the window that you have. We assume people know how busy they are and commit accordingly. Now, this is one I've really had to watch out for, because I just trust people to have a better sense of how busy they are than I do. And then I found out that's not always true. Sometimes I need to anticipate for them whether or not they can truly commit to what it is that I'm asking for, and then we'll find something that they really can commit to. We have some people who are in collections, and that's a principle. I'm sure that there are some people, Kelly, you might respond to me on this one. I'm sure there are people who are overly optimistic about what they can do when you're working on finding a solution for them. Sometimes we assume that we can anticipate the future, that we know how things are going to unfold, and we've got to drop that assumption. One of the things that makes Menlo software work is because they schedule for a week. That's all, and they can create enough predictability in that amount of time, but they don't go beyond that. For the week-long increments helps them structure it in ways that are manageable for their people. They don't work overtime. They even, this is so cool, they even got on somebody's case because she was checking her email while she was on vacation. That's not the usual world. Most of us are checking our emails all the time. My last time I did training for executive admins, there was one woman who was needing to check her emails 2, 3 in the morning in the middle of the night. And another assumption is because you told someone something, they know it. Now basically what I'm talking about here is just be aware of how busyness affects people. And it changes. It changes everything. So here's what you can do up front. Number one, make communication agreements. Acknowledge the busyness and agree to behaviors that you both can count on. One of the things that I ask people that I'm associated with is if they will respond to me in a 24-hour period. They don't have to take care of my request in 24 hours, but give me some sense of what I can count on within 24 hours. Using codes. So if something is urgent, there's a code that tells people, please handle this right away. We need to have ways to reach people when urgent. So there's normal means, but agreements of, okay, so you agree to check your email or you agree to answer your phone. Keeping posted about commitment changes. These are just some of the commitments that I use regularly. I have a whole list of them that I work with when people are developing communication agreements. And the thing about this is make it doable. This is an iterative process. Someone in one of my trainings was telling me that she had finally figured out how to update the executive she supports so that he would, when he went into a meeting, he had the information he needed, because he wouldn't read all the details, but sometimes he needed the details. She said it took a year of trial and error. Well, try it, and if it doesn't work, if people aren't getting back to you, okay, if you couldn't commit to that, what can you commit to? Communication agreements, what you can admit to on time or when. The next one is to make every interaction count. And one way to do that is to prepare. And here's an example for that. Let's say you're leaving a voicemail, or you're placing a phone call. There's a good chance you're going to get a voicemail. So what are you going to do? Are you prepared? Can you leave a succinct one that moves the conversation forward? Have a modified handle it once rule, and I see that would be more clear if I put the handle it once in quotes. Now, the handle it once rule is very standard in time management. The idea that you touch a piece of paper, you do something with it. You do it, you delegate it, you drop it, but you don't just move a piece of paper from one side of the desk to the other. Well, the modified handle it once rule means think in terms of moving things forward, making every interaction count. And here's an example of that. Let's say that I'm calling somebody and I get their voicemail and I say, can you meet Wednesday at 2? Well, if they call me back and they get my voicemail and they say, no, sorry, I can't do that, what have they done? They've just invited another interruption for another conversation, which might not move the conversation forward. So in busyness, always move the conversation forward. Flow matters. Keep the flow going. Move every discussion forward as much as is practical in that interaction. The handle it once kind of implies that that's it. You handled it and you're done with it. And that's a little absolute for reality. But the idea of it, the principle of it, is very useful. Go and see. Walk a mile in their shoes. And sometimes you can do this, sometimes we can do this deliberately in reality, and other times we just need to do this through questions. Get a picture of the demands on their time. See for yourself what they respond to. Once upon a time, I sat next to my web developer. I was amazed by how often his phone rang, how many interruptions he had, and it kind of told me why he tended not to answer emails. Now, in his case, and for a lot of people, this is true. If he was at his email and in a response mode, when he got it, he would respond. If he wasn't, then chances are it would get buried and lost, and I'd never hear from it again. Now, I don't operate that way usually. You know, when I'm evacuated from a fire, and sometimes there are times when things do get down there. I get to them eventually, but they do get lost in the whole thing. However, it's useful to see that other people do. And he actually confessed that he cleaned out his inbox by scrolling down 60 emails and deleting everything that was below that. All right, he is not my web developer anymore. I actually found someone who answered the phone. But sitting next to him for those 2 hours while he was working on my website was so instructive. And so it gave me an idea of what I needed to do to get my needs met. Now, I told you about this lady I had a project with who wasn't responding as in a way that struck me as being as professional and intelligent as I knew her to be. And here's what she said. She said, we're like the girl in The Exorcist. Our heads are spinning and we expect pea soup to spew any minute. Very colorful. And it really gave me, again, an idea of what demands were. And so we worked out an arrangement of times where we could meet so that I could get my needs and questions answered. Okay, I'm switching back because I'm looking at your questions right now. And Kelly, I really like this. In our world, if a collector doesn't handle a case from A through Z and drops the ball, it makes more work later for other collectors in the unit if they only do the immediate action. You know, taking things from start to finish. There's an idea in Lean about stapling yourself to an order and to see where it gets caught and where it gets stuck. And the point here that I'm sure, Kelly, you could testify to this, is that it takes a lot more time. It doesn't make a little bit more work. It really slows the productivity and the efficiency. Okay, so go see, walk in their shoes. Next thing is visual controls and mistake proofing, and this is another Lean concept. And sometime in the near future, I plan to do a Lean-based webinar and continuous improvement-based webinar to share a lot of different ideas of ways we can use Lean principles in our ordinary offices and work. So some visual controls and mistake proofing, those sign here stickers are great. You know, never underestimate the ability of a busy person to miss the semi-obvious. It has to be completely obvious. I have two pictures here from FastCap, which is a Lean factory that I visited. One is how they keep the tools in the desk. It's obvious at a glance what's missing. It's obvious if you borrow something where to put it back. Another example is the way this is the inside of their dishwasher. So they sort the forks and the knives and the spoons so that the person who's emptying the dishwasher doesn't have to do that. It's obvious where to put it. And then the one on the right is an attachment checker. And that is to tell you if you missed an attachment. If you put something into your email that says, I've attached the annual sales report, and then there's no attachment, they'll say, are you sure you want to send this message, or do you want to include an attachment? Those are just a few examples of mistake proofing and visual controls. So Cheryl, I see you use slides and stickers. Okay. Someone sees Menlo? I don't know. Are you on? I don't know how that could be. But again, you know, the slides are available to you. Well, I'm going to keep moving along. I'm seeing that some people are having some challenges with the slides, and I'm going to keep moving along and remind you, of course, that you can access the slides on my website. So next is to address busyness challenges. And so sometimes you just need to have a conversation with people. And I've done this several times. It's been a risk, but I've told people, now if we're going to work together on this, I need a better response. I need your attention at times. And have a conversation about how you talk. Cite specific examples of what's not working and tie it to the busyness. Tie it to the idea of, no, I understand how busy you are, and here's what my experience is. I invite their input about how to overcome the challenges. And talk about what you want more than about what you don't want. Talk about what you want more than what you don't want. Focus on the desired outcome. So instead of saying, you know, I don't want to have to double check your work, you can say, you know, I want to be able to count on your work being complete when it gets to my desk. The next point is to be willing to squeak. Some people live their lives reactively and they respond only to the loudest squeakers. It's a sad reality. And if you have an urgent need, you might need to squeak. A power phrase is as strong as it needs to be and no stronger, so is a squeak. You can squeak in the most delightful ways. I said just yesterday to my assistant who had proofread some things, I said, oh, you forgot to tell me about how cute the new header is. And, you know, I said, But she said, yeah, I noticed that, but then I was just busy doing the editing. I said, yeah, you had a job to do and you did it well. But then we got a discussion about just that was satisfying to me there. Let them know what your options are if they don't respond. Now, this is something someone used with me. It was a presenter, a meeting planner. And I was a little surprised because this was the first time she had requested a session description. But she said, if I don't get a session description by this afternoon, I'll make one up for you. Now, I believe that was intended to be a threat, but the truth is she's a very good writer, and she knows her audience. And I said, hey, go ahead and do that if I get a chance, if I can rework it. So it actually turned out to be a very positive thing. But that's how she squeaked. Now, when people are beyond busy, you got to know when to assert. And use power phrases. Now, these are these principles of power phrases. Simplify. Break your communication into understandable, digestible parts. Clarify. Be concrete. Relate ideas to experience and actions so no one has to guess how to apply your thoughts. Okay, so simplification means small pieces. Keep it simple, stupid. I actually really learn a lot every time I create a PowerPoint presentation because I always like for it to look nice on the screen. And so in order for that to happen, I need to cut things down. And I find simpler, more clear, digestible ways to say things. Twitter is great that way. Clarifying, being concrete, experiences and examples so no one has to guess how to apply your thoughts. That's one of the things why the power phrases are so popular because that's about as concrete as you can get. Here's what you say. Lead, indicate what your next step will be and make it easy to respond. So again, this is moving the conversation forward. Disclose, speak your deepest truth. Talk it and walk it, follow through consistently so that people don't have those same challenges with you. And connect, be graceful, personal, and relational. And I sum this up in the simplest way, and that's at the top in my header. Say what you mean and mean what you say without being mean when you say it. So overcome your own beyond busy habits. Think longer term. And so what I mean by that is that sometimes you need to give people a piece now and another piece later. And you can plan for that rather than overwhelming them because they're already overwhelmed. Because what happens, they go into overwhelm and they can't think. They've lost their focus. So you don't want to overwhelm people. So think longer term and consider communications. Okay, I can do this piece now and the next piece once they've digested that. Be realistic in your own commitments. I have a very strong commitment now to I can get a lot done, but I don't like having too much to do. So I have a very strong commitment to not overbooking myself right now. That doesn't mean that it doesn't ever happen. Life does happen. But being aware of how much you're committing to. There are some people where you say, they say, I'll call you at 2, and they're going to call right at 2. And there are other people where they say, I'll call you at 2, and you're not going to arrange to be near your phone at 2 because the chances of that happening are very rare, very, very thin. Balance urgency with importance. And importance means, this is the Covey concept of the kinds of things, the bigger picture that move things forward. Allow a little extra time for misunderstandings and interesting possibilities to surface. My husband's a natural health consultant, and he finds that if he allows people time, just a little extra time, things will come up that are very critical, very important for him to understand in guiding them in their care. Take the time for clarity up front. There's a saying, we never have time to do it right the first time, but we always have time to do it over. Well, doing it over, it takes a lot more than twice the time. So it saves time. Now here is some very straight, simple clarity tips. Standard communication clarity. Add titles if you're writing, subject line if it's an email. And if you're talking, even thinking in terms of what would I title this, kind of shifts how you're thinking and again, some helps you be clear. Use bullets, use numbers, and use action steps. So number 1, do this. Number 2, do that. I have 3 points on this I'd like to make. There's 3 ways I can help you. What that does is it engages your thinking mind. I'm going to pause for a moment now. I'm getting some chat that is that's letting me know that people are not on the same slides that I'm seeing on my screen, and I don't know if so I'm going to unmute and just talk for a few minutes and also see what questions we have.
You are now unmuted.
Okay, so I want to know how's everybody doing? We're getting some of you are on different slides than I'm on, and I'm wondering, are you following on Meeting Burner or are you following on SlideShare?
I'm on Meeting Burner.
And you have
Same with me.
And you have a different slide than what I'm. Okay. So
what do you have right now, Meryl?
Overcome your own beyond busy habits.
That's what I have, and I'm on Meeting Burner as well.
Okay.
This is Kelly.
All right. And then some of you are on Meeting Burner, but you're not catching up with the slides. Is that correct?
Hi, my name is Vital. I'm calling from 1199 Disability. I'm calling for a return to work date. Can I give you a social, please?
Okay. So
it is Brooks, BROOKS.
All right. So I'm going to unmute us again, and let's just keep our conversations. Does anyone have something you want to say before we unmute? Because there's a lot of chatter.
Your name, please.
All right. So I'm going to mute again, and we'll continue. And if you have comments, I'm watching those.
So she's still out?
This conference is locked.
Uh-oh.
The conference is now unlocked.
Learning.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You are now muted.
All right. So overcome your own beyond busy habits. Next is when to assert. Well, assert yourself when you're as clear as you can be and you're still not getting through. Assert yourself when the confusion and lack of clarity affects you in ways that they need to know about. You know, they're so busy, they don't see how much more work they're creating for you. A great phrase for this is, I think you don't know what happens when you don't complete the work and before it gets passed on to me. Assert yourself when you have ideas about how to fix the problem, ideas that can help. Assert yourself when it's about to become a deal breaker. Now, this is a principle from the book Life Scripts. Show your power before you use it. And what they mean by that is don't pull a plug or do something drastic that's final before you've let people know what you're considering. You know, with Susan, for the session description, it was intended more playfully in that she said, I'll make one up for you. But at the same but if you're really ready to say, I'm ready to go to another vendor or I'm going to report you up the ladder or something like that, let them know. Definitely assert yourself. When do you flow with it? Well, sometimes we've just got to flow with it when it's clear the demands on others have them totally maxed out. You know, a very extreme example was when we were evacuated due to the Waldo Canyon fire. We had all we could handle and appreciated people cutting us some slack. When it's clearly a learning curve, and when you believe they're aware that they're doing all they can to improve. Flow with it when there's a competitive advantage to flowing with it, and this is something that's really key. So that there could be an advantage to you because you're willing to remind people of your appointments, you're willing to fill in the gaps that their busyness is creating. There's a competitive advantage because some people aren't, or they don't know how to do that. And so that could mean business that you get if you're willing to go the extra mile. Flow with it when it's an isolated incident, and flow with it when you know there's a problem, but you need some clarity before you open your mouth. Brandy, I appreciate your tip here. You refreshed the web page, and that worked. So thank you for that. That's very useful knowledge. Do any of you have any comments on this? When you assert, when you flow, how do you decide if it's time to address the busyness or not. Any comments on that? I don't see any immediate ones, so I'm going to move on to the next point, which is sometimes we've got to recalibrate our relationships. And that means rework your relationships, rework your expectations so you're not dependent on people who just aren't reliable, whatever it's due to. Here's a phrase that I've used. While I love our time together, it seems difficult for you to schedule ahead. Let's just make same-day plans so cancellation won't be an issue. This was with a friend who would cancel more often than she showed up. And I didn't take it personally. Her life was hectic, and it still is. And this is what we do now. Sometimes she'll say, can you make lunch today? And you know what? I can. Let's do it. And that works because before I was feeling like I'd be looking forward to it. I would arrange my schedule, and then again she wouldn't be able to come through. So it's finding other ways to work with people, dealing with the reality of how busy they are. Here's one that I use with someone who is working with me on a project. You know, with your schedule, you don't need any pressure from me to deliver anything. So let's refigure how we work together so you can contribute your expertise without pressure. You can see how this takes it from the problem into a solution. I'm not blaming them. I'm just acknowledging reality. It's looking for what works after we've acknowledged and figured out what doesn't work. Now, I told you I was going to give you a counterintuitive tip, and this is it. Slow down to speed up. It's counterintuitive because you think it takes more time. But it's a reminder that I give myself all the time. My tendency is want to hurry through things. Just take a pause, take a deep breath. An example of that is for an email. I will have an email ready, and I'll go in and put some tea in my cup, and then I'll come back and look at the email again. Usually, or very, very often, I will think of something that needed to go in it. So that's just one example of how slowing down can speed you up. Because if I don't do that, if I hit send, then I realize, oh, I didn't say that. Now I've got a second email I need to send. That's more work for me. It's more work for them. I don't come across as clear. So just slow down to speed up. Here are some power phrases for you, and I have these. If you go to speakstrong.com/webinars, you'll see that I have this posted as well as a Beyond Busy worksheet. We're too busy to babysit each other's projects, so let's make commitments that we can count on. Now that one can sound a little bit strong. You know, a power phrase is as strong as it needs to be and no stronger. But that's a good one for you to try on and maybe adapt and adopt. But that's saying basically, you know, I want you to absolutely be able to count on the quality of my work that I will get done so that you don't have to worry about reminding me or checking up on me before our due date. So instead of promising things that we might be able to do or might not be able to do, let's decide exactly what kind of commitments are we really willing, cross my heart, to commit to. What are the absolutes? Then we can also have aspiratory goals, but what can we count on? Number two, I'd rather know now if you might not be able to follow through than to find out later. Boy, I cannot tell you how often people have told me that they could do something because they thought I wanted a yes. It's a habitual pattern. And so with these people, I've learned that I need to be strong and clear and just let them know. No is an option. You know, I'd really rather know now if this isn't going to happen, you know, if you've got too much going. So I'd really rather know now. Number three, I know you're busy, so I'm calling to remind you. Now, this is for if you decide it's okay, you are willing to take on some of the responsibility because you know how busy they are. That's the reality. And you acknowledge if I know you're busy. If we take the time for clarity now, it'll save us lots of time later. This is one admins use quite a bit with their executives, a morning meeting. 5 minutes can save time and keep the focus right for the whole day. To make sure we've been clear, can you tell? I've been clear. Can you tell me how you plan to proceed? See, the point here is on your own clarity. How effective have you been? Now, I will tell you, there have been some times where I've worked with people who were clearly busy, and I have kind of made it a personal challenge to communicate in a way that they would get my point. And so I'd send them an email and see what I got back. And okay, that didn't work. I'll try something else. Okay, that didn't work. And then sometimes I've had to get to the point where I have a conversation about how we talk. Now, some of you notice that some of these would put people on the defensive. You need to know who you're talking to. And they're also, power phrases are all circumstantial. Remember, they're as strong as they need to be and no stronger. And in some circumstances, it can sound perfectly appropriate, whereas in other circumstances it might be stronger than what you need. Just making sure you're on track for Monday. Number 7, I just need a short answer here. Let people know. Sometimes they're telling you the whole story, and that's fine. I appreciate all that information. I just need a short answer right now. Here's something that happened. I posted about this recently. I had asked somebody when their vacation time was. I needed to know when they were going to be gone on vacation. Well, their email gave me all of the considerations they had for exactly when they were leaving. It was not very specific. It talked in terms of, early in the week, the last week of July, so there was nothing. I had to get out a calendar and a calculator to figure out when they would be gone. And they weren't answering what I was asking, because I wasn't asking, what's your considerations? I was asking, when will you be on vacation? Here's what happened for me. I found I was looking at that, and I was getting a little confused. And then when I got clear, okay, here's the disconnect. Here's what I'm asking. Here's what they're answering. That helped me refocus on the information that I needed right then. Number 8, can I count on some response from you for every communication within 24 hours? 9, you've had to cancel so many times, I suggest we wait to schedule again until things settle down for you. Number 10, I've been in your office and I know how many things compete for your attention. It's hard to get your full attention when I need it. Do you have any suggestions for me? So this actually enlists their support, enlists their help for you in finding your solution. As Kelly points out, response will be based on how they interpret and not on what you're saying. And so all of these are adaptive. It's one of the challenges as a phrase author, that my intention are to get you thinking about what's really going on, what considerations need to go into the comment. And then they need to be adapted. And you can tell if somebody's taking offense, then you respond to that. So the scripting is never intended to be mechanical. That is so important. Say what you mean and mean what you say without being mean when you say it. That's the bottom line of any communication that you have. I started with that, and it still works for me. It is still the principal foundation. Now, it also means that not being mean when you say it means that you have to be very aware of how the other person is receiving. You have to have that sensitivity. But the scripted phrases that I give you here are to jumpstart your own meaning so you can say what you mean in your situation, and you can mean what you say in your situation, which means you walk your talk, you say what you do, and you do what you say. And you're not mean when you say it, and that means that you're as strong as you need to be to get results, and no stronger. Not that we can always get it right. You got to understand that. And even if you're as gentle as you can be, people won't get it. And it's possible sometimes to be too gentle. A friend was telling me about a time when she was having a conversation with an employee. It was an hour long. She was firing him, and she was firing him in the way that her company told her to do. At the end of the conversation, he said, okay, I'll think about it. Whoa, wait a minute. That's not what the point of this is. And so I share that story with you because sometimes we do need to be stronger than we like to be to get through, to get people's attention. My last point here is to shine. Realize that you, no matter what your challenges and flaws may be, you are a beacon to the world. And this, I came across this because I felt kind of bad that I had sent out an email that had links that didn't work. So I was reading Isha Lerner's book, and that's what I came on. And that is what I realized. Okay, just pick up and keep going. And this is my message to you too, that no matter how busy you are, there's always time to shine. And if you do find the time to shine, that will help you shine through some of the fog of a beyond busy world. So coming up, Speak Strong Summer School Intensive, you can find that at my webinar site. And what that's about, it's the basics, the bigger skills. And some of you know that Speak Strong evolved in part from my inability to speak up when my first husband developed cancer symptoms. I couldn't, that was a different kind of fog I was dealing with. It was a fog of defensiveness. It was a fog of absolute terror. I know that now. And I didn't know how to say what I meant and meant what I said without being mean when I said it in a way that he could hear. So I shut down, and I lost him to untreated cancer. That was about 26 years ago. Well, you never know. There are times when you're put to the test, and you don't realize you're being put to the test. But I always say, develop your Speak Strong skills on the small stuff so you have them when you need them. You have them when the fires start, like the Waldo Canyon fire evacuation. And we were all in a little bit of a fuzz when we got the reverse 911 call saying it was time for us to leave. And we weren't really sure. We were just kind of assuming it would get taken care of and we'd be back home in a day or two. So my husband said, why don't we leave the cat here? She'll be more comfortable. And I responded without any hesitations or apologies, the cat is coming. And he told people many times that that was the most clarifying thing he had heard in a long time, that cut through his fog. Well, the point here for me is that is something that has developed over the years. And Speak Strong Summer School is about building that foundation so that when you do need to cut through communication in a beyond busy world, when there's fires to fight, that the words will come and you'll say them without hesitation, you'll say them without apologies, and people will hear. So that's my tips. That's how I recommend that you that you communicate in a beyond busy world. And I want to thank you so much for being here. I'm looking at my Q&As now, and I'd like to know, I'd like to know what you heard that was useful to you. Or you could put that in the chat also. Jan says number 9 is good on the power phrases. And Cheryl says 10. Oh, this is a good one for bosses. Yeah, this is a good one for bosses. And I'm very strong with admins. The one thing you have, and people who support people, is that if you can work around it, that's fine. But if you are not able to do your job because you're not getting the communication you need, because you can't cut through the busyness, it is time to assert. So, Cheryl, I need to make my box bigger so that I can see more participant messages. Cheryl, you learned to speak up when your husband was in the hospital 18 years ago. And thank goodness that you did learn to do that. You were able to apply it when you really needed it. Diane, you might soften number 8 by saying first that you try to get back with people within 24 hours. I like that. I like that a lot. And Diane, this is a comment from Diane Windingling, who is a co-author on Perfect Phrases for Icebreakers. So Diane helped improve on my work quite a bit and on my phrases. Heidi, thank you so much. Appreciate the kudo there, the appreciation. All right. So as you know, there is as I've told you before, the slides are available to you, and I will be recording, having a recording of the webinar what I would really love to know, what questions do you have, and how you plan to use it, what difference it makes. So I'd appreciate it and Joy if you kept the conversation going. Thank you so much. And I wish you all grace.
You are now unmuted.